Greetings to all of our viewers. I'm Tijana Bjeljac, and I'm here with the Professor Manlio Graziano, who is specialized in geopolitics. Today, we're gonna talk about wider impact that the still ongoing Middle Eastern conflict has on the entire world, and especially taking into consideration the great powers. Professor Manlio Graziano, PhD, teaches geopolitics and geopolitics of religion at Sciences Po de Paris, at University of Sorbonne, and also at Geneva Institute of Geopolitics. And besides many papers and books that you published, Professor, there is one that just was introduced this week, published this week, and is called World Disorder. Also, Professor Graziano is the founder of Nicholas Spykman Center for Geopolitical Analysis. The center was founded in 2022 and is non-profit, non-political international association that is gathering students and professionals from all around the world who are interested in learning about geopolitics, but also producing a high-quality geopolitical analysis. And currently, besides these videos, you can learn more about the Middle East and Middle Eastern conflict in the session of seminars that are starting on 28th of February. There will be 6 seminars, and they will be every Wednesday afternoon at 6 p.m. Central European time. So don't hesitate to sign up, and you can find more information on Spykman Center's website. Hello, Professor.
Hello.
Last time in the video that we published on this channel in December, we spoke about Israelo-Palestinian conflict that is still not showing any signs of slowing down, or there is no any grand solution on site. Today, we're gonna try to talk about more about the global international relations and global politics that is affected by this conflict. Especially, we will talk about the role of the big powers. So maybe to start with the US, the world's biggest power, who is usually very vocal about the conflicts around the world. Am I mistaken to think that US has stayed quite silent since the 7th of October, besides the initial reaction? We don't hear much from them.
I wouldn't say that they are silent. They are pretty active. Blinken went to the Middle East several times. But the problem for them is that they are pretty much embarrassed. This is a crisis they wouldn't have avoided if they could have, because they are supporting Israel when Israel is not supported by the rest of the world. And I would say that in a kind of way, what is going on now in the Middle East is weakening the window of opportunity they had with the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine relaunched NATO and increased the importance of the United States as a counterbalance at the global stage, And the crisis in the Middle East today is having the opposite effect. The United States is more and more isolated in the defense of Israel. We could see it in the vote in the Security Council and the United Nations. And so I think this is the real problem they have, especially if they look at the incoming election in November, the presidential elections, because it's very clear that there is an atmosphere of increasing isolationism in the United States. And one of the reasons why Donald Trump is going very well in the polls is the fact that he embraced completely this isolationist trend that is very present among the population. So I think that there are many, many reasons why the United States should be worried about the continuation of this conflict. But at the same time, it looks very clear that they are not able to do anything to stop it, or to, in any case, to reduce the impact on an international situation. And it's clear for Israel, because Israel is not listening to the advice of the United States. And it's very clear as well in the actions in the Red Sea. They tried to organize a coalition against the Houthis in Yemen, but this coalition didn't take off. I mean, it was just reduced to a coalition between the United States and the UK, and it didn't go further. At the very beginning, they presented a very big coalition, and it didn't work. So there are many signs of the weakening of the United States and the isolation, increasing isolation of the United States. And this is a big problem for them, of course.
I'm very glad that you mentioned these two points. If we can now move to Russia and Ukraine, because Russia was in a hotspot for almost 2 years, all the way till 7th of October. If I'm not mistaken, they have a lot of interest in this conflict because that sort of moves the spotlight from them. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Absolutely. I would say that the crisis that started on October 7th is a kind of blessing for Russia, because Russia is much more free to move on Ukraine, because the global attention is somewhere else. And of course, it's not the only reason, but again, we can put all the things together, because everything is linked, of course. The fact that the United States is more and more isolationist translated into the difficulties of providing weapons and support to Ukraine. The support was planned by the United States, didn't work because the Congress didn't approve it. So everything is linked. Russia is freer to move in Ukraine because the influence of the United States is weakening, and because we have these crises that are distracting the attention of the world. But there is also another aspect of the thing, is the fact that the crisis in the Middle East showed an increasing distance between China and Russia. For example, on the Houthi crisis I was mentioning earlier, it looks like China is much more interested in keeping the route of the Red Sea open, whereas Russia is insisting much more on the fact that there is an aggression of Americans and British against the Houthis. So they have a different approach because they have different interests, of course.
Can we stay a little bit on that one? We know that crisis in Yemen is ongoing for quite some time, but what is currently happening in that part of the world? Because it's been barely a couple of weeks that we are hearing again about it, and that seems to be a new opening crisis. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
It's certainly not a new crisis, because the war in Yemen has been going on for now almost 9 years.
And we forgot a little bit about that,
exactly,
if I may say.
Exactly, because they are not very popular and as the Palestinian crisis. But it was several times the war in Yemen was proclaimed the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. And of course, nobody paid attention, because there were no Palestinians involved. Only when the Palestinians are involved, the attention arises. And the Houthis are able to exploit that, because they saw that if they use the Palestinian cause as a leverage, they receive the attention they didn't receive for 9 years. And so they are just exploiting that to improve their just their role in international relations. Of course, the situation over there is much more complicated than that, because there was an ongoing process of I wouldn't say pacification, but in any case, the stop of the war. The war was essentially a war between Saudi Arabia and the Houthi. The Houthi found the support of Iran, because Iran used them as a proxy against Saudi Arabia. But since Saudi Arabia and Iran tried to get together under the auspices of China, Saudi Arabia moved toward an attempt of finding a solution to the crisis with Yemen, with the Houthis, because Yemen is currently divided in two parts. The northern part is controlled by this Houthi movement, and the southern part is controlled by a government which is recognized internationally. So this crisis is a problem for Saudi Arabia as well. And so the situation is much more complicated. Saudi Arabia, for example, didn't take part in this coalition against the Houthis, which is almost paradoxical, because the war started because Saudi Arabia wanted to push back the Houthis in 2015, and now Saudi Arabia is not taking part in the coalition against the Houthis organized by the United States and the UK. So you see the complexity of the situation. But it's clear, and if we want to see also another aspect of the situation, is the fact that Iran used the Houthis as a proxy, but now they noticed that the Houthi are not so easy to be controlled. So
doesn't that happen very often?
Yeah, it happened with all because even Hamas, I mean, now it's pretty clear that Iran was not involved in the preparation of the attack on October the 7th. So in a sort of way, of course, Iran capitalized very well this attack and the consequences, especially the bombing, indiscriminate bombing of civilians in the Gaza Strip. But at the same time, they show that they are not very able to control Hamas. They are not very able to control the Houthis. They are probably the only movement they can control a little better is the Hezbollah in Lebanon. But even in this case, of course, Hezbollah is a local movement. And so Hezbollah has to coordinate its interest in being a tool in the hands of Tehran, and the other side being a political party active in the political landscape of Lebanon. So it's always much more complicated as it appears at the first sight.
I would just go back to you mentioning China in the context of Yemen, but more broadly, we usually see China as a peaceful economic power. Is that correct? And what could be their role in the current conflict?
China, of course, has this priority, which is to keep the global situation under control, or as much peaceful as possible, because China is essentially an economic actor on the political on the global stage. So, as any economic actor, they prefer if the situation is calm, under control, and everything is going smoothly. And this is why China didn't like the starting of the war in Ukraine, because it went against its necessity of keeping the things calm. But at the same time, China is not only an economic actor, is also a political actor. The two things cannot be separated. So in political terms, China is trying to take an advantage of any situation that could create problems for the United States, of course, or at least any problem that can distract the United States from focusing on the relationship with China. So China is not happy with the Ukrainian war, is not happy, even less with the war in the Middle East, especially because China was trying to put together Saudi Arabia and Iran, and invited both of them to be part of the BRICS in the Johannesburg meeting. But at the same time, they know that the United States is in dire straits with this crisis. So they see an opportunity to take advantage of these American difficulties. So, of course, for them, the priority is that things got peacefully. They wanted to find the solutions to the problems because they wanted to invest. So everywhere there is a war, they cannot invest. So that's their priority. But at the same time, since they didn't start the war in Ukraine, they didn't start the war in Gaza, they try to take advantage where they can take advantage, of course.
Makes sense. And finally, can we talk a bit about India? India is, I think, talked much less about, although it is rapidly rising economy, it is surpassing China in population. Is it possible for India to still stay, let's say, in every alliance, friends with everyone, if I may say, or does it have to take sides at some point?
Of course, at some point, India would be obliged to take sides, for sure. What I'm a little less certain is the fact that that India can be a competitor for China or for the United States or for anybody else, because China has a huge internal social and economic imbalances, and also political. So I think that they have, of course, a lot of potentialities. For example, you mentioned the demographic potentiality, but it's first of all this window of opportunity, the demographic window is closing very rapidly, because the most recent data about the fertility rate in India say they are around 2.1 children per woman, which means that they are arriving at the end of the demographic expansion. And so they should capitalize now very rapidly, and they don't do it. Why? Because India has still a very, very low urbanization rate, which means that India is still an agricultural country. It didn't move toward the real process of industrialization. And this is also because India is still a very protectionist, very closed country. And so it's very difficult to trigger this new phase of development that China started 40 years ago. So they have to fill this gap, and this gap can be filled with political decisions, of course. And it looks like the current government, which is going to win the next elections again in 2024, this government is not ready to do it, and they try to compensate in using religion as a tool of division of the people, because they just wanted to win the election. So they are just acting like any politician in the world, which is much more interested in winning the elections than in promoting his or her country. So this is a huge problem for India. In any case, if India is able to develop, and in any case, if the international crisis worsen, India will be obliged to decide what they wanted to do when they grow up, because they try to be together, have good relations with together. Today, French President Macron is in India for an official visit, and it's the more the world is divided, the more it's difficult to be friend with everybody.
And I guess that goes for every country. If we had to sum up, how is this conflict in the Middle East shaping the world today?
I would say that it's still a local conflict, which has huge global implications, as we see, but it's local conflict. It's much less. I mean, for the last months, there were a lot of discussions about the possibility of spreading the crisis to other countries in the Middle East, and of course, if it spreads, it has more global implications. And I since the beginning, I was a little skeptical about the possibility of spreading the crisis, and so far, it seems that I was right. I mean, of course, we cannot say anything about what happens next, but so far, in the sense that why I was thinking that, because nobody, except probably Russia, but Russia cannot play a role in the situation in the Middle East, but nobody else wanted to spread it. Nobody else is really interested in spreading. Of course, everybody was pointing the finger to Iran and say, oh, probably Iran wants to take advantage of the crisis and spread it. But Iran is in very, very difficult position because they have an internal economic situation which is terrible. We know perfectly that the regime is totally unpopular. And so if they try, or in any case they are involved in a major crisis, they risk simply to disappear as a regime, because of course the people who are dealing with the daily difficulties just to survive or to arrive at the end of the month, if they see that the government, instead of providing services or whatever they need, spend money in wars abroad, wars that people don't approve, by the way, it could be a huge crisis in the political system in Iran. And so I think that the government and the Ayatollahs are smart enough to understand that they cannot afford another big crisis. So
I guess that's some silver lining in the whole situation. Thank you, Professor, for this very productive conversation. And thank you, our dear viewers, for staying with us for this video. Please subscribe, follow us, and wait for our next video, which is coming soon on a different topic.